Are we recording a podcast? When did that start?
A podcast for me. You shouldn't have.
I think you need to talk louder.
You need to scoot up.
Yeah.
You need to talk louder.
Podcast for me. You shouldn't have.
Say it with your chest.
You know what I found out?
What'd you find out?
I found out that, Phil Collins did the Tarzan soundtrack.
You didn't know Phil Collins did the Tarzan soundtrack?
Okay, but get this. I played Feel It Coming, right?
You'll be in my
Stop
heart.
it. So I played that song, right?
Yeah.
Or In the Air. What's it called? One of those. You guys know the song.
I just know it from Lasagna Cat.
Coming in the air tonight.
Yeah. So I played that song for Rainey, and she had never heard that song before. And then she was like, wait, is this the guy from Tarzan? I was like, I don't know. And then we played the Tarzan soundtrack, and it was Phil Collins again.
Yeah. Two worlds, one family. Trust your heart. Let fate decide.
We're going to have to pay for this now.
For example, did you ever want to go one place when the gang wanted to go somewhere else? What did you do? Did you ever want to go one place? What did you do? For example, when the gang wanted to go somewhere else, what did you do?
Everybody talking about magism, shagism, dragism, madism, ragism, tagism.
What are you doing?
What is that?
What is happening?
You know, just like... Come on, go with me.
I don't know what
All
we're doing.
we are saying
I don't know this one. What are we doing?
is please wear a mask. Come on, guys, you gotta join in.
so
You gotta join in.
thought-
Come on. All we are saying.
Wait, is that how it goes?
I thought I recognized it. Then you said, please wear a mask, and you lost me. Hi, and welcome to Tangent. I'm Jamison Weileman.
I'm Isaac Hopwood.
I'm Maxwell Mahoney.
Maxwell, John Lennon cover Mahoney. That's what we call him.
I'm actually more like Maxwell, your mom.
And that's the truth.
Just brilliant.
This
Brilliant.
is the worst podcast on the planet. And you're listening. Isn't that great? How you guys
I'm
doing?
so proud of that joke, guys.
Oh, I bet you are. How you guys doing?
I think you wrote that down last week.
Yeah,
I see it in our Discord, actually. You said, I'm going to say Maxwell, your mom, Mahoney. He's planned that for a while. Dang.
Yeah. And if you're going to comment or anything on this video, we'd like it if that's how you referred to him as.
And once again, we're keeping up the trope that this is a video podcast. We're continuing that this
Did
week.
I say something else?
No, you didn't. You definitely didn't. Keep
Okay,
going.
fine. I wanted to ask you guys how you're doing. You know, how we doing? How we feeling?
All things considered, doing okay?
Yeah, Max?
Great.
Great.
No one can see you nodding, but I think that means you're doing okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm terrible. I'm doing terrible
Oh, okay.
because of this
a
comment
bummer.
I got on a video.
Oh no.
I'm so broken up about it.
Oh no, the internet.
Yeah.
You got on, like you commented on a random video and someone commented on your
No,
comment?
this is on a video I made.
Oh.
And then someone commented on it, and it made me frustrated to a level I didn't know I was capable of.
Like Andy from The Office.
Yes, I did punch a hole in my wall, and I put googly eyes over it. Now it's got its own little personality.
That's cool.
I know.
Yeah. Tell us about this comment.
I will. I you guys have seen it. This is not an ad for my YouTube channel, but I made a video called "The Arkansas Flag Needs to Change," in which I talked about how one of the stars on the Arkansas flag symbolizes the Confederacy, and how I thought that was less than good. Right? And I said that should be changed. And then this comment happened, and it just shook my world. I wanted to read it to you guys. I wanted to get your reaction to it. I'm not going to say this guy's name, but here we are. The beginning of the comment. What about it? I'm black and from Arkansas. The flag means that Arkansas is the only state with diamonds, hence the shape. 25 stars means it was the 25th state to join the U.S. Red, white, and blue represents USA. The other 3 stars on the bottom represent Spain, France, and the United States, countries that had earlier ruled the land that includes Arkansas. The star on the top, however, can go because it represents that Arkansas used to be a Confederate state. But other than that, there is nothing wrong with my state flag. So I replied to this comment and I said, yeah, dog, that's what the video says. Because that is
Indeed it does.
almost word for word in certain parts what my video says. To which he then replied, and this is what really gets to me, and we're going to have a discussion about this, but this is what really gets to me. So just sum up the video and just say, take the top star off. And I replied one more time. I said I was providing context, kind of like you with that paragraph you wrote. That was the end of the discussion. But I have to, there's so much to this. And maybe you guys don't see it at first, but it's all I can think about. Because obviously this person posted this comment without watching the video, right? Would you say that?
I think maybe.
But if he...
Or maybe you just... Like I personally feel like you got your point across pretty well in the video.
Right.
But maybe he didn't and misconstrued some facts.
Or went into the video already knowing what they wanted to say.
True.
Yeah. And then he just repeated my argument in an accusatory way. That's what kind of gets to me. Is it felt like he was criticizing me, but he agreed with me, and I'm very confused. And then when I pointed out that is what I said, he told me to sum up my 3-minute and 45-second video by just saying that. A thing I think I said about a minute into it. And maybe this is just me. Maybe I'm losing my mind over nothing, but maybe I am. Maybe this is actually nothing. All right, podcast over. This is nothing. And I freaked out over
No, keep going. You're good.
Okay, fine. Here's my thing. I wanted to use this comment because it's weird, it's odd, in a unique way. And I think it's indicative of how we talk to each other online. Because this person who actually agrees with me is fighting me for some reason. And I think I see this all the time on the internet. And it doesn't make sense to me. I wanted to get your guys' opinion on that. I wanted to talk about how we talk to each other on the internet. Because this podcast will be on the internet. And people will join in discourse about it and the things we say and our topics that we talk about. And we're going to have people who respond to our stuff in ways that we won't fully understand. And so I wanted to have a full-on discussion about how we communicate on the internet. I wanted to do that with you guys.
Let's do it.
Okay. Perfect. Do you guys have any more thoughts about this person and the way they communicated? We can edit out pauses.
Mm-hmm.
And then this long slurp I'm going to take.
Perfect.
You're welcome.
Or you can just leave that in.
Yeah, I think, I think that a lot of people want to be right. I think all of us have something in us, whether we're online or in person, there's something in us that wants to be correct, right?
Yeah.
And so the internet kind of offers an avenue to which we can always enter discussions and always enter conflicts that we know we're going to win, right? Like, even if it's just in our own mind's imagination,
Right.
Like, we can enter some sort of social battlefield that we can, at least to us, come out victorious.
Do you think people view the internet as a social battlefield?
You can hop on Twitter. And,
yes, the flaming hellscape.
I think it's definitely a social battlefield. What used to be something that's just an expression of yourself is now like it has to be like the defining feature of like what you stand for. You know what I mean? It has to represent everything that you believe in.
Yeah, we used to have these places that were just for, here's a thought I had.
Yeah.
And now it's the place we go to every day to war over the ideas of our country in a weird way, which is scary that we created these systems.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting that like I feel like different social medias are used for different forms of discourse. Like Twitter, obviously, I feel like is much more political. Or Instagram, per se, is much more like, how would you say?
Plagued by influencers.
Yes. Yes. And it's about like
People
showing...
trying to sell you things, mostly.
Selling things and like just basically kind of showing off.
Yeah.
But like all these like different social medias are have different forms of discourse and ways of showing this form of like conflict.
What do you think is YouTube's discourse? What do you think is the main like? How do you think?
I think YouTube is less of a social platform.
I would agree with that,
and more of like a money making platform for
Yeah.
YouTube.
It's definitely become that.
I feel like it leans more close to like a streaming service than it does to.
Well, yeah, because they
social
basically
media.
made it that way.
Yeah.
You are following channels of content. You are,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I
Yeah,
see it.
and so I think that that's a little bit different. But I mean, obviously, anyone can upload a video about anything, and anyone can comment on those videos, like what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But and you know, like Max is saying, those different social networks have different purposes, but it's possible that those different purposes are all scratching the same itch that we have for social interaction.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll get a little bit further into that as we go along. But I want you to go ahead and get started with what you have prepared here.
Well, I have some more stuff I wanted to talk about real quick.
Sure.
But I don't know. As we were talking about this, I thought about YouTube and how about. Okay, so Netflix doesn't have a thing where you go on there and you comment on the thing you just watched.
Sure.
Yeah, like that doesn't exist, but YouTube does.
It's very loose as far as like Netflix, not exactly, but like IMDb, you can rate things. But that's the extent of that.
What's interesting is that the comments are part of the entertainment.
Yeah.
On YouTube.
For sure.
Like
Yeah.
there's the content that is the video just watched, and there's the content of the comment you were reading. It is part of the appeal. It's part of the streaming service.
And there are even some videos that are, I would argue, are like specifically just for the comments. You
Yeah.
don't even watch the video.
I've found more entertainment in comments than I have in videos in the past. That's for certain. I think that's interesting. It actually goes into kind of what we're talking about. We're going to come back to that in a moment. But I wanted to read a couple of lines from this document I found from a keynote address from Professor Harold Thimbleby, which is a fantastic name, and I'm sorry, Harold, for mispronouncing it there. But also, you deserve it. Anyhow. Whatever, he's never going to listen to this. And if you are, Harold, I double down on it. You suck and you deserve it. Anyhow, I don't actually know anything about Harold as a person, so anyhow.
Let's keep talking more about Harold.
He's a professor in a British university, and he wrote this speech. It's either a paper or a speech about internet discourse. His main paper is about how it's changing and the potential it has. But this is a quote from him I wanted to talk about. He said, "Writers create worlds that are inhabited by many characters who may tell different stories. On the internet, we find people in spoken/written correspondence taking on new identities for themselves." I thought this was really interesting because, and I think he's right. There's the people we are day to day, and then there's the people we are on the internet. There's the persona we throw on when we comment. We're basically actors when we go on to stuff like YouTube. We are part of their monetary system. You provide YouTube with free content when you go on there and you write a comment or you make a video. But more so than that, you create an identity for yourself on these places. So it's not even so much that you guys were talking earlier about how people go on these places and they become battlegrounds. It's interesting that these are the places where people go to become warriors, in a sense, that people's identities online have turned into that. I think that's weird and intriguing. Like this idea that maybe we want to be fighters and warriors, and we live that passion through internet discourse, maybe.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, so the idea is we all have a desire to fight for something worthwhile, and specifically on something like Twitter or Reddit or something where it's much more based around the discourse than it is around the content.
Yeah.
While sometimes, this example you're talking about now is around YouTube comments, which is still true. We strive to support something that has meaning because all of us inertly want to be passionate about something that matters.
Yeah, and we want to appear that way to people.
Sure.
That's you're putting on my mom. I was talking to my mom about this. That's right. I talked to my mom about things.
Perfect.
I know. And she described it as people putting on a face, is what she said, which is a her generation way of saying, acting, of creating an identity for yourself.
Yeah, something you mentioned about comments becoming the content. I think something like with Reddit is that it actually numerically quantifies that with karma, right? So it kind of encourages you to participate in the ecosystem of Reddit by like positively reinforcing you whenever you make a funny comment or a relevant comment on a subreddit, right? Because you get the more, like, your karma is the number of upvotes you get. And so if you say something really funny or say something that people want to hear and you get a lot of upvotes, then you're gonna get a lot of karma, right? So it kind of is built into the ecosystem of how the whole system works.
But at the same time, that's not what that can do is it can create like basically a group of like thinking people, where like, especially on Reddit, because Reddit is kind of a bunch of clones of the same person, or else it feels like that sometimes, where everyone's upvoting things that they like and that they appreciate. And of course, you have the niches of Reddit in which individual communities can upvote each other. But as a whole, Reddit has rules, and it has certain unspoken rules, that is, about what it will upvote and what it will downvote. It creates a like-minded group of people.
Especially in r/dank memes.
Yeah,
there's like a whole community of like, this shouldn't even be on this page, or like,
Yeah, discourse on the internet kind of creates this fracturization of that's not the right word. It creates groups like internet discourse does, or in my experience, it creates groups that of like-minded people who reinforce their own ideas about the world.
Which, in some cases, that's the most beautiful part about the internet.
Yeah, in some cases,
a lot of things have a lot of groups or clubs or whatever that would never have had a chance of being formed or like have active members can come together. Really, really niche groups of like really niche hobbies or random things like that can thrive on the internet because of just that opportunity that the internet gives.
Yeah, like my favorite subreddit is called BreadStapledToTrees.
That's a great one.
It is a subreddit of pictures of bread stapled to trees.
Yeah, so something like that. But even to the extent that it allows people who live in rural areas or areas that would never be able to
take part of the global stage.
Yeah, exactly.
Gives them that opportunity.
For sure. And like, if you want to be a part of a subculture that would only really otherwise exist in a highly populated, highly culturally saturated environment, you can hop onto Reddit into a very niche subreddit and suddenly like you are right at the pulse of what everyone is thinking and how everyone's operating.
And that's kind of interesting. Back to the whole identity things. Our offline selves are, community based in our actual communities where we are geographically, but online we are suddenly global people. Our identities shape that into that global outlook of the world, the connectedness to everything and we have all this information. And so our identity on the internet can be vastly different than ourselves in our reality, and especially how we interact with each other. I love this YouTuber, Max knows this, called Internet Comment Etiquette, and often, and his whole channel is about kind of mocking how terrible we are to each other online. I think he says his show is about how people who are anonymous on the internet interact with each other. Like, for instance, I don't think no one in face-to-face conversations is as mean to each other as they are on the internet. There's this anonymity, if you can call it that, not necessarily like on places on Facebook, it is your name for the most part that's connected to your profile page, so you're not necessarily anonymous, but sure. There's the screen you get to hide behind when you make comments.
And I think that actually goes back to what we talked about last week with human empathy, right?
Yeah.
By having a screen in front of our face instead of a human in front of our face, we get to disassociate with whatever empathy we might have felt beforehand, right?
Yeah.
And depending on the issue, regardless of if a person's in front of you or not, you're still going to feel just as fired up about it. But with things, with issues that are so non-important, right? Like so random, and the types of issues that people get fired up about on the internet, half of those things, or a vast majority of those things, would never have caused any conflict, any substantial conflict.
It is incredibly, in my case, I would say it is not necessarily difficult, but it's not necessarily easy to hate another human being, in my experience. But it is incredibly easy. I would say it's harder not to hate a bunch of ones and zeros that make an anime profile picture. I mean, it's harder to hate. It's harder not to hate that than to not.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, because you said it, you said disassociate. Like, you're no longer angry at a person, you're angry at the pixels that form a person. That's that disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Max, were you going to mention something?
Yeah, I was going to mention, like, in terms of, like, when we have, like, genuine human conversation, like, face-to-face, there's always the connection of, like, seeing their eyes or their expressions and how they respond to what you say. And you're never going to get that, like, at all with, like, internet conversation unless you're just, like, hit me up on, like, Google Duo, you know? We're taking this to Google Duo. That's not going to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And I always hated texting. Like, even people I know, and even people, like, I know how they talk, I know how they communicate. Over text, you can still misinterpret the people you know better than anyone.
Here's an interesting, this is back to Harold Thimbleby, that jerk, and his paper. This is something he said in his introduction, and we're going to have this link down below. He says there are two, and I forgot to mention this earlier. He is a professor of computer science. That would have been great to know earlier. It's not just some professor. This is his life. This is something he said. There are two contrasting modes of human communication which correspond to the spoken and written word. In spoken discourse, communication is sequential, spontaneous, and conversational.
Tangential, maybe even.
Yeah, sure. Shut up. I'm reading. In written discourse, communication is planned, and neither its creation nor consumption need be sequential. So what's interesting here is that he's right. Conversational is spontaneous, and it is based on you reacting to what I say and me reacting to what you say. Internet has that element to it, except it's also written into a sense. It is planned conversation. People can think about what they're going to say before they write it, but it mimics speech, even though it's not, or it's a new form of speech. It has it wears the clothes of conversation when it's actually written discord. I think that's very interesting. How we don't think about it, or maybe it's just me. I often don't think about these comments I see as such. I in my mind, the comments I read is a conversation I'm having. When in actuality, it's sort of the illusion of conversation.
I think what it can do is cause us to have an unhealthy feel-safe, right? Like, it allows us to... It just adds a level of hiding behind the screen, right? Because, you know, it also adds to the certainty of adversary, if that makes sense. So it's almost like, you know, if I stumble on my words when I'm speaking and accidentally say something I didn't mean, and I go back and correct it, generally that's taken with grace, you know what I mean, in a conversation. Whereas when someone says something in an email, in a tweet, in a YouTube comment, especially in a tweet when you can't go back and edit it, or an email, right? Then it's like, I have written proof that this is what you said and this is what you meant, right? And so it kind of adds to the level of hostility you feel when someone says something that you don't agree with.
People don't have the grace of a conversation. Because we like to think of these interactions as conversation, when in reality they're not. Even though people make the same mistakes in internet speech as they do in offline speech.
Sure.
Yeah. Neato. I'm going to bring up another article. This is Power Online, the Internet as Discourse. This is written for thesocietypages.org, and it is an article by Ruth to Surya. I hope that's your last name and I said it correctly. Ruth, in contrast to that, son of a gun Thimbleby, is probably a fine person too. Both of these people are probably just fine. She has a lot to say on, kind of more like we were talking about the groups that we form on the internet. She has a lot written about that. But this is what struck me in her article. She says, online, the individual user is communicating with the masses. They are out in the street or at the marketplace or at the school or at church. Even if they are physically alone in bed, online you converse with everyone. I thought that was very interesting. Like, we don't think of posting something on the internet as standing on a street corner with a megaphone giving your opinion, but that's exactly what that is. You are on an open place and you are just speaking your mind to whoever will listen. The difference being that you can filter in those voices on the internet, I suppose. But in many ways, especially with how hashtags work and the way algorithms on places like YouTube work, you are standing in the middle of a street, just screaming out into the void. And it's never been how I've thought about how I communicate on the internet as that sort of way. It's an odd thing because standing on a street corner screaming your ideas is not socially acceptable in most places, in most forums that is. It's a little different than a protest per se, but doing it online is incredibly exceptional. And I think that goes back to that anonymity we feel or that security we feel on the internet. There's this level of vulnerability that exists offline that is gone online. So maybe people say mean things or rude things or things they wouldn't characteristically say online because they don't feel as vulnerable or open or as closed off, that is, as they do when they are online. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how do you think, I mean, it's not too difficult to imagine, but what would it look like if online discourse was just taken away? Right? I mean...
And like, we were only left with, like, human conversation? Is that what you mean?
Sure. I mean, like, it wasn't that long ago that was a reality, right? So,
yeah.
So how much has human psychology really changed in that amount of time?
I'm not sure if human psychology has changed. I think the world has changed and human psychology has had to adapt to it in a sense. Like, I mean, you can't say... I don't know. An apple on a table won't fall to the ground, but you remove the table and suddenly it will. It'll rest on the ground. But the apple always would have fallen to the ground. I think how we interact on the internet is how human beings always would have interacted on the internet. You know, I just think that now we know because the table's been ripped out from underneath us. You know, I don't know if psychology has changed. I think the world has changed and human beings have taken their place in that.
Yeah, you know, we really don't have any conclusion from this, but it is interesting to always think about the role we have to play. And, you know, I think that it is always worthwhile to be more genuine than it is to put up a facade. You know what I mean? Like, even if the people we're chatting with on the internet have, you know, anime logos as their avatar on YouTube.
Real quick, if you have an anime logo as your profile picture, I do hate you, and I am no, you're fine. You're absolutely fine.
So I think it's always worthwhile to treat the person behind the phone as a human. You know, even if the consequences are null.
Yeah,
it's always worthwhile, and
empathy seems to be a reoccurring theme on this podcast, which I'm all for because I think empathy's the coolest. But I guess it's just always having to realize that person you're interacting with is a human, even if they're the ones being horrible to you. Like, that's a person that's... And by the way, this goes back to that guy who, or whoever they were, who said that thing to me. That person wasn't being horrible. What I looked at when I saw their comment was confusion. I was wondering, if you didn't watch the video, why say this? Or if you did watch the video, why say this? And there's no good answer to it. And I guess that's what's interesting to me is that the internet has given a platform for nonsense language to take place. And I think it's dumb to get worked up about it because it's nonsense. You know, I want to maybe cap off this part of the conversation with a quote from Ruth again to Syria. Discourse is created and maintained by us, and so we can and must participate in it. True, some have more power to influence the discourse than others, but we can try and contribute to the discourses we are part of, online and offline. Like, it's our duty. Dear Lord. It is our
Duty.
Thank you. It's our duty to take place in discourse. Like, we have to. It's there, and people's ideas are shaped by it. It sucks that Twitter's a battlefield, but if you don't fight that battlefield, bad discourse can take place. And, bad ideas can take hold of a nation. And that sucks. It sucks that that's the way it is, but the table's ripped out from underneath us, and we kind of have to take a part of discourse. Or else, if we're not there fighting for empathy...
I don't know if we necessarily have to, to some degree, not being a part of it is being the better person. And I feel like some people can get that. For say, if I see someone spouting off, in anger on Twitter, I'm not going to be thinking good about that person.
Right.
Necessarily. Because I see that, I'm not going to be like, oh, well, they clearly know what they're talking about. They must be right. To some degree, I think some people are definitely smart enough to think that, I can always step back and not be a part of that culture and be the better person.
Sure.
I agree with that. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I think that there's something we haven't talked about is the people who choose not to be a part of that social discourse intentionally, right? There are, people who understand the conversations being had there, but choose to not participate, whether, just don't have a Twitter account, don't have an Instagram account, don't hop on Reddit, just whatever. Yeah. And I don't think that they are any less noble or, just because they're choosing not to put on the metaphorical warrior's mask, right? And arguably, maybe these people are actually able to be more genuine than those of us who willingly become entrenched in the, web of social media.
I'd like to rephrase what I was saying because I communicated it poorly.
Sure.
But when I say be a part of discourse, I don't mean get into arguments with people online. I mean put out good ideas.
Okay.
Because discourse is about, we are putting content out there when we comment, when we post things. And I'm not saying fight people on the internet. I'm saying if you see a bad idea in the world, be the one who's putting the good idea out there. Mm-hmm. Because if we don't do that, then these places are overrun with bad ideas and bad, politics and bad discourse. And good discourse exists when we put things with empathy out there in the world, when we talk about good things, when we lift each other up when we need to be lifted up. That's just as much as discourse as any other thing, because it's all about communication. It's not necessarily about creating an argument with someone else. It is about being a good voice in a world that needs it. Maybe, and that's what I was trying to say when I said be a part of that. If Twitter's a battlefield, then you're not necessarily lobbing grenades. You're more about building structures.
Or
good
even
structures for people to find refuge in.
Yeah. Or even, if you choose not to participate in that online platform, even just being that voice of reason and that good influence to the physical community around you. And arguably, now more than ever,
For example,
we need that.
The gang wanted to go somewhere else. What did you do?
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast recommends.
Oh, is that what time it is?
Yeah.
Oh,
It is, we have entered the domain. That's what I meant to say.
right.
Domain.
I like Dominium too. I thought that was dope. What does that mean?
Yeah. I don't know.
I'm going to Google it while you
Anyway,
talk.
welcome to the domain of the podcast recommends. I'm Maxwell, and I am recommending Midnight Gospel on Netflix.
Tell us about it.
So yeah, Midnight Gospel. It was a show released on 420. This
year?
Yeah.
4/20/20.
Yeah, 420/20.
Oh my, that's awesome.
Oh, wait, is that dope animated show?
Yeah.
I have seen that. I haven't watched it. I've seen ads for it, and it looks very cool.
It's actually made by the same writer and creator as Adventure Time.
Nice.
Yeah. One thing that I find really hilarious about it is that always this is gonna sound kind of hypocritical, but I feel like a lot of podcasts kind of have this air of pretentiousness.
But not us, though.
Yeah, not us. Not us at all.
Let's all say the word 420 again and laugh at it. 1, 2, 3, 420. Oh, it's just me. It's just me laughing. Oh my goodness. Okay. It's really embarrassing. Okay, continue.
So yeah. Anyway, I feel like a lot of podcasts kind of just have this like air of pretentiousness to them, and Midnight Gospel, like it is technically like an animated show that is literally a podcast episode essentially.
What?
Like it is an episode that's like interviewing like a specific random person in this like universe.
I've also seen this. Like that is the format.
Yeah.
Each episode is this person.
And basically like, they're just interviewing while like literal insanity is happening around them. Where they're just having a normal conversation while they're like getting beaten to a pulp, and people are like having like fascist overruns from the government.
Yeah, or there's a zombie apocalypse. Yeah. Or you're in a weird place where you're being turned into like food or something like that.
Exactly.
Like the conversation is not a part of the narrative.
Yeah.
Even though the conversation is
the
narrative.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's I guess you could say there's two separate narratives occurring at the same time that don't care about each other at all.
How many episodes is it?
I think it's like maybe 8. Can't remember specifically. But anyway, kind of back to the air of pretentiousness. Like I feel like the show fully leans into that. It like embraces that pretentiousness. And I love that. It's just like making fun of the idea of it and embracing it and shoving it in your face.
I'm not trying to hijack your promotion here, Max. I've always felt like the conversations, everything on it, felt very sincere to me.
No, I would agree.
Yeah.
But like the idea of like the conversations, I feel are kind of pretentious.
Yeah, but also it feels like the kind of, and I believe it's part of the joke that all the conversation sounds like you're with someone who's very high. And they're trying to unravel the mysteries of life with you. And that feels like what the show is about. And I don't think it's, I think that's on purpose because the show's like art style is very, psychedelic. You said it was uploaded on 420. Yeah. We're still not on that yet? Okay.
We'll get there.
Okay, we'll get there. I think that's a part of it. I agree with what you're saying about the kind of self-awareness of it, but I do believe there's so much sincerity there.
I would 100% agree. Yeah. There's a lot of like interesting conversations happening. People being genuine in terms of the conversation. Yeah.
Awesome.
Huzzah.
I need to check it out. I guess the
It's really good. I'm here to recommend The Blob. The 1988 The Blob specifically. Max and I have watched this. Max, you love this movie, right?
This movie's amazing.
This movie's
very, very gory.
That's the best part. I love this movie. I've seen both the Blob movies, the 1958 one with Steve McQueen and the 1988 one with, his name is Kevin Dillon. I think his brother's slightly more famous than him. I'm going to burp. Oh dear, pardon me.
Good thing you're editing this show.
Good thing I'm editing this very loud episode of the show. This story, it's that B-movie horror monster movie from the 1950s, but it's brought to life into that 80s context. And so it's got this kind of, I don't want to say punk rock aesthetic, but it's got this anti-establishment kind of aesthetic going for it.
Screw the man.
Yeah, and that's actually somewhat present in the 1950s version, but to an extent, like there's this kind of adversarial thing between the adults and the children in that movie that I feel is very much amplified in this version of the movie, except it's more like the government's the bad person now, kind of. As well as the amorphous blob that consumes everything it comes into contact with. It's a surprising movie in that characters you didn't expect to bite it very quickly, actually. And shockingly, it is disgusting to watch in a way that thrills me to the core. I love it.
Like an 18-year-old guy just dissolved.
Oh my goodness, yeah, it is disgusting and it is beautiful. The special effects, the specific, because it's not CGI. There's a couple stop motion effects in the movie that don't necessarily hold up as well nowadays, but when it comes to these practical effects, this movie is outmatched and outclassed or it outmatches and outclasses the majority of things being put out nowadays. It is a spectacle movie. It is entertainment. It has its popcorn moments, its moments of genuine gore, but also there are good human characters in there to connect you to the themes and for you to feel empathy for and to strive and hope they win in the end. And also, I think this movie is trying to say things. Would you say it is, Max? Maybe it's trying to
about society.
This is a movie about society, guys. But I would say that maybe it doesn't necessarily live up to those aspirations as much as it maybe thinks it is. The writer of this movie is I forgot. I'm trying to remember. IMDb is not showing me currently. Because I know...
Frank Darabont.
Yes. Is that his name? Click on his name for me and tell me all the other stuff he's directed. The written. Because I think he does a bunch of Stephen King stuff nowadays. Yeah, he did Pet Sematary, did he not? The new Pet Sematary?
He's known for The Green Mile, The Walking Dead,
Oh,
Shawshank
right.
Redemption.
He directed the Shawshank Redemption.
Wait, really?
He's a writer.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Did he not direct those movies, or did he just write them?
He wrote them.
Okay. The writer...
Who's the writer again?
Frank Darabont.
Okay.
Am I pronouncing that right? Anyway, the writer of The Blob is a man named Frank Darabont. You know him as the writer of The Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, a bunch of Stephen King stuff, a lot of movies that you probably love if you've seen them. And also this really disgusting B movie from 1988 that I don't hear anyone talk about ever. Like, when's the last time you guys have heard this brought up in discussion that wasn't me showing it to you in your dorm room, Max?
I don't think ever.
Never.
Yeah. So I love this movie. I love the 1950s one as well, but this one I feel like is just better. It doesn't have that kind of aw shucks, aw geez thing that the 1950 Blob does. It has better character development. It's a genuinely entertaining, disgusting movie, and I dearly love it. Okay, that's my spiel.
Perfect. Awesome. My recommend for this podcast is...
Your recommend?
My recommendation,
there we are.
Is Devs.
I'm keeping that in, baby.
My recommendation is Devs, which is a FX limited series on Hulu by Alex Garland. And I'm actually not going to talk way too much about it because all of next week's episode is going to be about it.
Oh, really?
We're going to do a deep dive on Devs.
Why didn't I hear about this?
I didn't know.
You guys definitely did hear about this.
Was this in the Discord?
It was in the Discord. Man, you guys should have read that.
Oh wait, I remember we had an entire conversation before the recording of this podcast about how we were going to do the next one on devs. I remember this now.
Right.
Perfect. So Devs is... So Alex Garland directed Annihilation. And,
one of my favorite movies ever.
There you go. And Ex Machina.
A movie that exists that I like, but not as much as Annihilation.
Yeah.
But it's also really good.
Yeah.
Still really good.
Didn't he also have something with Dredd?
He wrote Dredd, and if you ask the stars of Dredd, he directed Dredd. Don't ask the guy who's credited as writing Dredd, but if you ask Carl Urban, I believe is his name, he's like, nah, Alex Garland directed Dredd. But like, it's a bit of there's some tension there. There's a little bit of tension there. Apparently, no one liked the director on that movie, and they always went to Alex Garland with their questions about stuff, to where it got to this point where basically people just say Alex Garland directed it and the other guy didn't. But little backstory. Dredd's also really fun.
Dredd is not what I'm recommending, though.
That's what I'm recommending.
There you go. So Devs, Alex Garland very clearly is interested in, he specializes in science fiction, and that's what Ex Machina and Annihilation are both focused on in very different lights. Ex Machina is much more kind of hard science. It has more to do with a very real kind of Black Mirror-esque. It's like this is a very relatively realistic idea that could happen in the next couple decades. Devs is in that same vein, but almost more so. I really I don't want to talk way too much about the details.
Because we want you to see it for the next episode.
For sure. So, watching the series before the next episode would be really awesome. We're going to spoil the whole thing, so...
We're going to talk all about it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's got a phenomenal cast. It's really incredible.
Nick Offerman.
I think Alex Garland... So, it's a limited series, so there's only 10 or so episodes. And I think it provides more of a long-form format for Alex Garland to play around with. So, he really hinges that and uses that as leverage to his advantage for the suspense aspect and for the mystery aspect. And I really, really loved it. And I think it you walk away with some really fascinating questions about free will and AI and everything you want from an Alex Garland flick. So I'd absolutely recommend it. It's on Hulu, and it's very good. That's my recommendation this week.
Well, that's amazing. 420. Max is in on it now. Waiting on you.
Haven't gotten
Waiting on
me yet.
you, Isaac. Waiting on...
So this has been Tangent.
This has been-
Thanks for joining us this week. As always, you can email us at thetangentcast@gmail.com with your questions, concerns, your hate mail, your love mail.
Love mail. Love mail specifically for me.
For Jamison.
Your boy Jamison.
Or you can
You
can also leave us a voicemail at 479-339-9041.
That's my favorite number.
And you can leave us a message. Tell us what you think about internet discourse or your thoughts about, the Midnight Gospel or 420, whatever piques your interest. So
yeah.
Also, and watch Devs before next week's episode. We'll be talking all about it.
Give him that number again.
Yeah, the number is 479-339-9041.
Man, I love a podcast.